Cristal, I'm so excited to have you here, freshly-ish postpartum. We were just
Yeah.
talking about all the things that you learn and navigate and how there's really no one right way. There's no toolbox, but there is perspective and there is ways of figuring out your own. And this happens everywhere in life, though, right? Not just
Mhm.
motherhood. We have to figure out our own paths and our own journeys. And sometimes that can be extra difficult when we have this lineage or we have this cultural background that can maybe give us guidance that's really great and really positive, and we have these family people to hold us together, and then there's like things that we have to break and we don't want to
Yes.
repeat the same paths. I would love for you to just talk about how that's specifically shown up for you in the concept of just self-development as a whole. Do you feel like as you stepped into this work, like you work specifically with energetics and somatics, which can feel like a really weird term to people, so we'll break that down. But when you started delving into these things, was your association in your family like, great, Cristal, good for you, or like, what are you doing?
Oh my gosh, let me get comfy for this one.
Right.
Well, my parents both come from a different country. So they come from beautiful Mexico City. And you know what? I think when they get here, we are very culturally, I've learned that you have to hide your emotions. You can't really be weak. And I didn't really understand why that was. But
Mm-hmm.
I adopted that concept like nobody's business. I'm strong. I'm never going to be weak. No one's ever going to see me cry. Well, I have no emotions. Like I was the girl, like girls don't cry. And eventually that can only take you so far because we're human and we're like humans are made out of energy and we're always in motion. So energy in motion equals emotion. Like that's who
Yeah.
we are. And when I got into this work, I got into this work because I was going down a path where I am the achiever. I will achieve what's the next thing on my list, what's the next thing on my list, what's the next thing on my list. And in the middle of achieving all the things, I lost myself and I didn't even realize I had lost myself, but I just didn't know what came next. And I was always looking for
Yeah.
that next thing to do to keep me busy. And I remember telling my mom, I think I feel sad. And my mom's like, oh, well, it's because you're thinking about it. Don't think about it. And I remember like a few months passed by and I told mom, hey, I'm noticing like my emotions are coming up. I was like, I'm wondering if I'm depressed. And mom's like, well, yeah, if you think about being depressed, you're going to be depressed because you're thinking about it. Just don't think about it. It's like when you get depressed, go on walks, go do something. Like don't let your brain trick you into thinking you're this. And I don't think it was depression now looking back at it. I think it was just a lot of questioning, a lot of wondering what my life has turned into. Where have I like why am I doing the things that I'm doing? But in my family, like the moment I got into internal work, I think culturally we've learned, or it's almost like we're blaming our parents
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't give us like quote unquote the right childhood. Well, here's like just like a little nudge for anybody who needs to hear this. Like every single one of us, like we have our own demons, and they're not bad. We have our own things that we're processing, things that we're working through, things that we're going through. And it doesn't make our parents bad people because here's the thing. I do believe that our parents are raising us the best that they could. The best
Mm-hmm.
that they knew how to do is how they raised us. And I think when you go into this work, especially in my culture, it was very looked at like, oh, well, you're blaming your parents for not giving you the perfect childhood, which I don't think anyone had the perfect childhood. Now looking back at it, again, they did what the best that they could with what they knew. But no, it to this day, and I've shared this like before on stages too, but to this day, like I host events. I host and my mom has never attended my events.
Mm-hmm.
And people always ask, like, where's your mom? Where are your parents? They've never attended any of my events. And I used to get so upset at that before because I was like, well, it's my mom. Like, to a degree, like I still crave that I'm proud of you. I still crave that, hey, I see what you're doing. And I currently still do a lot of work to realize, well, they can only see me through through their own beliefs and their own limits. And in my mom's limits, like she's breaking her own generational cycles by even allowing her daughter to have a voice, by even allowing in her eyes do all
Yeah.
this. Because I used to think of like, why doesn't my mom speak up? Why doesn't my mom say things? And as I've been doing this work, I realized every single woman who uses her voice, every single woman who has a podcast, every single woman who's showing up, you're probably the first in your generation, in your lineage to ever do this, which is why it feels so hard. Which is why we wonder, like, oh, am I doing this wrong? Am I doing this right? Because we're the first ones. And if you peel that layer a little bit, I imagine my mom, she says some stuff, but she still doesn't, I know she doesn't say everything she wants to say. And then I peel that layer and I go to my grandma. My grandma didn't say much. And then I peel that layer, there like my great grandma had no voice. Her only job was to have kids and cook. That's it.
Mhm.
You had no opinion, you had no say. So every single woman like using her voice, I hope you like remember, like, it's not a mistake that it was you the one. You were
Yeah.
chosen because you have the courage. You're in the season of life where you're going to have the support, the community, the people, the resources to help you step more into that. But yeah, going into this work, to this day my parents still don't understand it. And my dad's a little bit more open, and I found like books that me and him can kind of read together and we start diving into it. But even with my dad, there was a lot of resistance. And I remember 2 years ago, Kelsey, where I talked to my dad about a specific thing on a book that we were reading. And my dad, I had never seen him get emotional. I had never seen him. He's like the rock. He's of the family. He's a strong one.
Yeah.
And we were reading this book. And he starts telling me, hey, at 12 years, like reading this book made me think a lot of why I am. And he said, I never knew this before, but he said, at 12 years old, my dad sold me so I could work on somebody else's farm so that he could collect the income to be able to support the rest of my sisters. So from age 12, I was sold to somebody else. That man kept him for a few years. Around 16, that man sold him to somebody else. So he starts opening to me about all these things, and immediately it clicks, this is why my dad is the way he is. Like, it just
Yeah.
made sense. So my dad's a little bit open. My mom to this day still doesn't want to hear anything about self-development, doesn't want to talk about self-development. But I have to understand that it's not anything against me. It's just there's still fear that comes around it because of, who am I blaming? What am I going to find out? So no, going into it, it was not something that very encouraged. But the more I've been the more I've been in it, the more I've realized so much about myself, my family dynamics, why we are the way we are. And it's such a beautiful thing because I've learned to like almost let go of the expectations I had and trust that I was literally put in the family that I needed to become the human that I am today.
That is so powerful. And I think it's such a good perspective shift because so often we can look at our friends, our family, our association, and we can wish for something different. We can
Mm-hmm.
say, like, why can't my family just tell me they're proud of me or help guide me this way or give me what I need in order to succeed? And I agree with you. Since I've done my own work, I look at the people in my association and family and I realize they are doing their absolute best. They've done their
Mm-hmm.
absolute best. There is no intent. And I'll put a caveat here. There are a couple examples. You may be one listening where your family member didn't do the absolute best. You may have been
Mm-hmm.
given a situation that wasn't the case, and I'm sorry. But whether your family did do the absolute best or they didn't, the
Mm-hmm.
fact is we've been given the opportunity to figure out what that means for us, right?
Yeah.
And we get to take the next steps, and it's not always easy. And I think a common misconception is when your family did do really do the best and your family does love you, that means that the rest is just smooth sailing, and that is not the case, right? There are
Mm-hmm.
these things that come up that you're like, wow, where is this coming from? And it's coming from years and generations ago, and you're the first one to break it. And so it feels so hard and so difficult. And I think historically we look at that as like whether it's abuse of
Mm-hmm.
substances or different things. And it's actually not always these big things. It's like using your voice, like you said,
Yeah.
it's speaking up, it's these smaller things that are actually big things, but we feel like they're smaller things until we start unpacking them and we're like, wow, why is this so challenging? Why is this so
Yeah.
difficult? And our family members, even outside of specific cultures in general, often don't want to open Pandora's box. They've
Mm-hmm.
chosen to not feel, they've chosen to not unpack things. And in this space specifically, when you say, hey, I want to be a change maker, I want to unpack the box, I want to work, they're like, why do you want to
Yeah.
go
Why are
there?
you doing that?
Yeah. And it's hard to be the first to do that. But when you say, you said you're doing the work still, you've done the work. How are there some situations where you found the balance of like, hey, I'm going to try to get my dad to read this book with me, as an example you gave, or I'm going to try to have this conversation with my mom, or other situations where you're like, you know what? It's just not meant, that's not meant to be something we connect on. Like, how have you done the internal personal work to decide where you bring others along in your journey and where you don't?
Here's the thing that I am very, especially in the season of life, I'm very open to sharing what's going on in my world, what's happening. And I trust my gut. It sounds like super silly, but I trust my gut very, like, if it feels weird, I drop it and I don't ever bring it up. I'll give you an example with my mom. We're hosting a women's brunch, a women's empowerment brunch. And I told my mom, I was so excited. And I told mom, hey, mom, we're doing this and this is happening. The conversation, rather than going, oh, what made you think, I was expecting to hear, oh, when is it, let me mark the cal. That's what I was expecting to hear, to be fully honest. And she goes, oh, okay. She's like, and do you know what you're gonna do in June for your dad's, for your dad to celebrate your dad? Completely ignored what I brought up. That was my little cue for me to realize, oh, this isn't for me to share it with my mom. And I completely went along with the flow. I was like, oh, I haven't even thought about that. And I completely changed it. And then when I walked away, rather than sitting here and being disappointed, I reminded myself, I was like, okay, this is not ever something that she would ever do. Be on a stage, speak at an event, do a whole thing for women. This is not something she would ever do. So why am I constantly putting this pressure on her to see the vision that I see? And I remember leaving my mom's house and I was like, okay, I have to understand that people love in different ways. People support in different ways. And I always talk about this because at an event, actually at the last event that I just had, somebody asked me, I never see your mom at your events. And this is a conversation I had from stage. And I said, you know what? Last year I was pregnant and there was one particular day where I remember feeling very emotional. I started crying and I didn't know why. I was feeling very ungrateful for being pregnant, but also I wanted to be pregnant so bad. And I remember feeling just lost. I didn't know what was happening. And then on top of that, I'm finding out that there's all these hormones that you get when you're pregnant. So
Yep.
I remember crying, Kelsey, like I had never cried before. I just sat in the chair and I cried. And all I wanted was my mom. And it sounds so weird because I've grown up as this like independent woman, like you don't need a man, you don't need anyone, which is how my dad had raised me. And I remember picking up my phone and calling my mom. And as soon as the mom said hello, I just started crying. And I knew in that feeling like I did something wrong because my mom doesn't do emotions. My mom doesn't do that. And my mom goes, what's wrong? And I said, I don't know. And I started crying. And immediately her voice broke. And I felt that feeling of, I want to be there for you, but I don't know how. And I remember she was just praying over the phone with me and she was just what she could. She never asked me to explain it more or nothing. And then she's like, okay, she's like, I have to get ready because your dad's coming home and I have to cook for him. And so she hung up. Me and my husband are sitting there and he's like, what's wrong? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't know what was happening. About 2 hours, he's like, I think we should go on a walk, at least to walk and see how you feel. We're getting ready to go on a walk. I'm leaving my house and I immediately see my dad and my mom pull up. Never once did she bring up anything of what's wrong. Why are you feeling sad? She comes in, Kelsey. She starts cooking. She washes the dishes. My dad sits in the couch, puts on a movie. No one's talking about my emotions. And in that moment, I told my husband, I was like, I felt so loved and seen without them ever saying anything. No one addressed what was happening. They just got there. And I realized every single human being loves in the best way that they can or through the capacity that they're able to love you. And it might not always be the way that I needed love because I just wanted a hug. I mean, her coming and cooking and cleaning and doing my dishes was beautiful and I felt loved, but I just wanted a hug from my mom. And did I get it? No. I didn't get a hug from my dad. I didn't get a hug from anyone. But in that moment, something happened really beautiful where I realized now that I'm going to be a mom, I have to understand that the way we want to be loved and the way others love us is very different. And it doesn't take away from it because
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for my mom, but it doesn't take away from it. And especially with this brunch situation that had happened, she didn't give me what I wanted. She didn't answer. And I realized, okay, it's nothing personal against me.
Yeah.
She can only love me the way she knows how to love me. And if I expect anything different, then I should have the voice to say, "Hey mom, I wish." And sometimes I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just I know she loves me and I feel that and I know, especially after getting pregnant and realizing this, like my mom would be here in a heartbeat. She might not be able to tell me physically, but she'll
Yeah.
show me in the best way she can. And then I get really curious. So for anybody who's going or navigating this with your family, my biggest encouragement for you is just get curious on why without judgment. And I know that's really, really hard, but without judgment, get curious as to why are they the way they are? Because I'll give you the scenario with my mom and what I just shared. After she left, I was still very bummed of like, I didn't get a hug. I didn't get a kiss. I didn't get you're going to be okay. I got fed and my kitchen was clean. But when they left, I was wondering why. Like, what's wrong with me? Why can't they love me the way I need? Like, why? And I got very, very curious, not about me, but I got curious about the situation, why we are the way we are. And my mom's mom died when she was 10 years old.
Mm.
So my mom had a mom up to 10, and then she, after that, was raised by an uncle. And she didn't have any other mom. She was after that, she was, I think, 17 when she started working, and she moved in with like a random stranger and lived with her. And in that moment, I got curious and I was like, wow, for my mom not having a mom, she's doing a really good job. And that immediately allowed me to just feel like it's okay. It's okay. And it's not anything against me and it's not anything against her. We're learning and we're humans in the process and we're doing the best that we can, or trying to, I should say, with
Yeah.
with our own wounds too, because we're all carrying our own wounds and our own pains.
Yeah. How do you let go of wanting more for them, right? Like your business is she's made for more,
Mm-hmm.
and you know you're made for more, and you know that everyone is made for more, right? But what about when people don't want more? And they're the people that you love and you see and you're just like, "Oh, mom, like you could step into this and like there's so much more for you," but they don't want that. How do
Yeah.
you let go of what you want for someone else when they don't want it for themselves?
So I've realized through this journey that more looks different on everyone. And again, I've been talking a lot about my family, but my parents, when they were 17 and 18, no, 17 and 16, um, left everything in Mexico, their moms, everyone, and they came here illegally, crossed the desert for like 8 days without food, without anything. They just on prayer and took off. They made it here. I used to want my parents to want more. Like, what's there more? Like, why don't they want more? Why doesn't my dad want to be an entrepreneur? He has all these skills. And as I was doing this work last year, I realized my dad stepped into his more. It was him leaving his family, his siblings, his country in a place where he didn't speak the language. He didn't understand the system. He didn't understand anything and hiding here because he was here illegally for 21 years. He's now a citizen. He got to vote for the very first time, which was super, super exciting. But his more was him leaving everything, and that was his more. My mom's more was um, raising her kids, not knowing what that was going to look like, not having a mom herself, not having her, because her dad, when my grandma died, her dad abandoned her. So she was raised by an uncle. Not having parents herself, she was able to have these little conversations with her kids. And that was my mom's more. My mom to this
Yeah.
day, her biggest dream, she was told she wasn't supposed to conceive, and she had four of us. So her more was believing in her faith and trusting God and having her kids and raising her kids. Her more was being the mom that she wished she could have had. And I wanted a different more for her.
Mm.
I wanted something more. I wanted her to speak on stages. I wanted her to run the events with me. And I realized that everybody's more is very, very different. And if you take a look at your lineage and your ancestors and everybody who came before you, they've stepped into their more in a different version. And it might not be the entrepreneur or the one that owns the buildings or the realtor, like whatever role we think the more looks like. But the more is the scariest version that sometimes we don't see because we're used to that more, that most of us are stepping. And when I realized that my mom's done her more, I can't judge her or want more for her because in her own way, she's done her more.
That is so powerful, and it's so important for us to look at that perspective. And talking about this lineage and your ancestors, and that there is this level of that's everyone's more, and you don't need to push anything. But then
Mm-hmm.
there's also this, I can imagine for many people, and I've been in this state where I've been like, why is it my responsibility to have all this
Yeah.
reflection? Like, why is it my responsibility? Why do I have to be the chosen one? Why do I have to be the one that is navigating all these thoughts and feelings, right? And being able to identify, okay, that is that person's more. So I'm not going to push them. And I am going to push myself here. And here's where I'm going to help others heal. And here's where I'm not going to help them heal because they're not
Mm-hmm.
meant to. But like, you're the one that's carrying all this like mental overload of
Mm-hmm.
knowing the work and doing the work and having the, generational healing. How do you accept that responsibility, even when it feels like so much at times?
So I used to question this a lot. I used to be a school teacher, and my brother's in the army. My sister is going through her college stuff as well. My little brother's going into CHP. So everybody's doing their own thing, and I was the only one that was like not happy. I was like, I'm a teacher. I have summers off, winters off, all holidays off, you name them. Why am I the only one very uncomfortable here? And why do I not want to stay here? And I used to get so upset. And I realized that not everyone has the abilities that I have to do the things that I meant to do. And if I compare myself to my siblings, we're very, very different. I am the oldest. I've had to figure it out since I was a little girl. I've had to pave our own path for us, all of us. And now that I'm here, I realized I was given this vision because I am the only one that is meant to make it come true. But not only that, every single time I step into my dream, I'm not only doing it for me, I'm doing it for every single woman in my lineage who could never use her voice. I'm doing it for every single person in my bloodline who died trying, or, to give you more perspective, like tried to cross the desert and couldn't make it alive. I'm doing it every single time I say yes. I just come to the conclusion and realize, like, yes, I am the chosen one, but also it's a privilege to be the chosen one. It's a privilege to know, my bloodline somewhere up there, they're all like, hey, we're going to pick this one right here. We're all going to give her all the strengths that all of us have, and we're going to pour them into her, because the dream isn't really about me. It's about what I'm going to create that's going to impact the next person, that's going to impact the next person, that's going to impact the next person. And I think when I make it about myself, that's where I think it gets a little heavy. But when I can make it about the next person, it feels a lot lighter for me.
Yeah, I love that. And conceptually, we can process some of these things, right? But there are actual tools that
Mm-hmm.
you've embodied to help you along the way, because I think it's so important for people to understand, like, when you start to feel all these things, we can talk through it and it can sound like, oh, yeah, I just, shift my perspective, or I think about it this way. And that's part of it. But there's days like the day that you're like, I don't know what's wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where we can't, like, where you don't know what tool to be using. So I'd love for you to break down some of the tools that you have learned along the way, of things that you physically and mentally and emotionally do and embody to be able to help support this responsibility of living out your vision for not just yourself, but the next woman and all the women before you.
Yeah. So something that I've been doing for the last 4 years and I do religiously is I practice gratitude. So every single morning when I wake up, the first thing, I don't grab my phone, I don't touch anything. I start having this conversation in my mind. And the first thing I say is, good morning, God, good morning, Cristal, and I love you. That is the first thing I do. I acknowledge myself and I acknowledge God, a spirit, whoever you believe in. And then I say, today, God, I am grateful for. And I do three things. But I don't just say I'm grateful for my house, my dog, my husband, because then I become a gratitude robot. I challenge myself to say what I'm grateful for and why. So today, for example, was today, God, I'm really, good morning, God. Good morning, Cristal. Today, God, I'm grateful for my bed, because even though I'm waking up with pain and all, like with all these things from having a newborn, newish born, I'm grateful that I do have a bed and that I can sleep somewhere, and that I'm not worried about where we're going to spend the night. And it was a very small one, but getting curious about why you're grateful for that thing helps you expand on it deeper. Then I said, today I'm grateful that I have a son. I'm grateful that you chose me to be this little guy's mom, that even though I don't know what I'm doing half the time, that we get to have these moments together and we're going to figure it out together, and that you're leading me. And I kind of kept it going. And then I was like, and today, God, I'm really grateful for my dog, for the fact that no matter what kind of a human I am, how I show up, my anger, whatever's going on, this dog loves me unconditionally, and that you put her in my path to just guide me and make me happy every day. And the moment I start shifting and asking myself why, what I'm doing on a subconscious level and on a is I'm using the words to rewrite the script of how my morning goes. Because very easy, you can wake up and you can drop a glass of milk and it can go into, oh, what did I just do? Oh my God, I'm late. And it just ruins the whole day. And I always like to say, is your day, did you really have a bad day, or did you have a bad 5 minutes and you just like kept bragging about them over and over and over until you stretched them out the whole freaking day? Like,
So true.
a lot of the, and we're human. So it's not like, oh, there's something wrong with you because you can't shift your perspective. No, sometimes it's really hard. It's really hard, and life happens, and you could be driving, you could get a flat tire. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything. But I notice that when I wake up in the morning and I already shift my day to thank you, God, or this is what I'm doing, I'm more likely to look for the good in life. And when things happen, when I used to be a school teacher, I remember one specifically time I got stopped. I got a ticket, and who's going to be happy about a ticket? I was like super pissed. And then I thought to myself, okay, what is this protecting me from? Because God knows, what if I was supposed to get there 10 minutes early and there was an accident? Like this stop actually stopped me from getting into the accident that I was supposed to get there. So
Yeah.
it helps you shift the perspective a lot faster, but it is a skill that you have to practice. It's not something that happens overnight, or it's not something that you're just naturally doing, because we live in a world where we're competing to see who has the suckiest life. And I say this because check this out. If you go to a gas station and you say, oh my God, the day's horrible, whoever's at the gas station will say, tell me about it. And, or my day,
So
I
true.
know they will, like, we love it. But if you want to make somebody very uncomfortable, go to a gas station. Go to a gas station, and when they say, how's your day? I'm doing fantastic. How is your day? Today's freaking beautiful. They'll stare at you like you're the weirdest person in the world.
It's
And I
true.
do this, and I mess with people all the time. And I always tell people, like, go to a gas station and try this and see what happens. But I used to test it out all the time. I used to go to grocery stores, like, how is it? You know what? It is so cold. I'm tired of this weather. I know it's nasty, and people just add to it.
Yeah.
So it's like an actual skill that I encourage everybody to try it. Like, start with your morning gratitude. See, and it starts by shifting the perspective little by little by little, and you're rewiring the way your nervous system thinks. You're looking for the good. That's one of the things that I've done, and religiously, like, has completely changed my life. The other thing is, I realize that I am a human, having a behavioral response 24/7. So my husband could come in here, slam the door, and I could be like, what's wrong with him? And this and that. It could turn into a massive fight. Or my husband could come in here and slam the door, and I could get really curious about, I wonder what's wrong with him. Like, I wonder what's bothering him. And something that I have done now, and another skill that I always ask and invite people to play with, is getting curious about the narratives that are in your head, without judgment and without questioning, like, what's wrong with me or what's wrong with that other person. Just getting curious about the narrative, what's happening. Ooh, who does this belong to? That's the big, big thing right there. Who does this narrative belong to? So if right now I'm yelling at somebody, or who does this belong to? And 90% of the time, it doesn't even belong to you. It's a belief you've been carrying around for generations and generations. And there's a whole process that we can dive into. If you let me know if we have time, but there's a whole process that I walk clients through with who did it belong to? When's the first time we felt it? And you go
Yeah.
deeper and you can literally rewrite the narrative as you allow yourself to feel deeper.
Yeah. Let's go into it at least a little bit. Let's start because I think there's a couple different reasons this is so important, right? For just general, we want to be able to process these different things, but as a parent, as a mom, we have to be really aware of where these things come up from and where these beliefs, originate from, whether it becomes parenting or as our kids say things and we feel triggers within us, or
Mm-hmm.
we see things in society for pressures. We were just chatting about the pressures of schedules and sleep training and things like that. It's like, where does this come from? Where did these ideations come from?
Yeah.
So I think having the tool set to be able to respond in things that make sense. I mean, I've seen this show up with members of our community of how their kids talk about their body parts, how
Yeah.
their kids talk about friends, or we just, as the time we're recording this, we just celebrated Easter. And I was just talking with a friend yesterday that has some religious trauma in her life.
Mm-hmm.
And her kids were asking about Easter. And she was noticing that she had a very visceral response to how she was going to explain that. And so there's all these things that come up, and motherhood is one giant trigger. And if you don't figure out how to navigate that and make it beautiful and make it that you're driving and that you're choosing these things, then it can be really hard. So I think this is a great exercise for a lot of reasons, but that is one of the big reasons that comes up for me, is to be able to figure out, where does this come from and why am I making this decision or this thought or this feeling?
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, we're just humans walking around responding 24/7. That's all we're doing. Like, you say something, I could respond. You say something, I respond. That's all we're doing. But when we get curious about responding, that's where you get to change the narrative and the belief. So, something that I encourage everybody to do is the next time somebody pisses you off, try it like when you're angry. The next time somebody says something and you get annoyed or you like want to say something. And here's the thing, a lot of us, because out of respect, sometimes we hold our breath and we don't say what we really want to say. And I'll say this like even with my parents' perspective. But I had a real scenario where this was maybe a few years ago, and this like really changed everything for me. But a few years ago, we had just moved homes, and we had it was about it was Christmas, it was around Christmas time, and my husband says, hey, my sister's coming and she's gonna come and stay here. She's inviting her friends are inviting friends. We had just moved into the property, and now I'm being told that there's about 15 adults coming into the house. One, I feel like it's a mess. We haven't even settled in, and all these people are coming in. And Kelsey, lashed out at him. I was like, how dare you? And it turned into this big fight. And it was the type of fight, I think this happened like 5 years ago. And the reason why I'm sharing this story is because it completely changed the perspective of our relationship and life and everything. But this was when I started doing the work early on. So not like right now where I can process it differently, but I lashed out, and I think we went almost like 3 days without talking. And I was like, well,
Wow.
he needs to apologize for me. He wanted me to apologize to him. It got like really ugly. And I remember I had just started doing this work where I had learned, let's get into our body, like what's happening. And as we were driving somewhere, because I wasn't talking to him, I was still giving him the silent treatment. I was in the car and I was asking myself, okay, what am I feeling? And I was sitting there in the drive and I was like, I feel, and I started identifying. So I think step one is identify, what am I feeling in my body right now? And I identified, I was like, I feel disrespected. I don't feel valued. And I started naming all these things, and I took out the notes app on my phone and I started writing them down. I feel disrespected. I don't feel valued. I feel ignored. And I started
Yeah.
naming all these emotions. That was step one. Name what you're feeling, because if you don't know what you're feeling, it's very hard to change the narrative and really drop down into the belief. So that's step number one, is identify. Step number two is get curious. And here's the question that I adore is, when was the first time you ever felt this? And as I was sitting there, I was like, okay, when was if I can close my eyes and think about when was the very, very first time I felt disrespected, as early as I can, take it all the way back. I remember being around 6 years old, and my dad coming and telling us, hey, your aunts are coming from LA. You need to get out of your room because your aunts are going to sleep in your room. At that time, I remember feeling the same feeling that I felt now that I was 27 years old, that exact same feeling. I felt it where I wasn't loved. My dad didn't care about me. My dad cared more about his sisters than me. Why would he take me out of his room to put total strangers? Their kids mess with my things. It was this whole thing. And I felt so unloved. I felt like I didn't matter. Like I was just, but obviously that wasn't the narrative. The narrative is just literally
Right.
for logistical purposes. It was easier to put the family in my room and then put me in my parents' room. But
Yeah.
as a little girl right there, I made a narrative.
Yeah.
The narrative was I'm not loved. I don't matter. That's it. That was the narrative. And that's what I stuck to. And that's what I carried. That's the belief that I carried moving on the rest of my life. Anytime somebody didn't check in with me or anytime somebody just skipped over me, that is where it took me to that feeling. And in my body, I felt it like it was a belief that was engraved in my body. And when fast forward, when my husband did this, it took me back to being the 6-year old. My husband became my dad. The house became my room. And I was reliving that scenario all over again. And that's why I lashed out. I got so angry. I went
Mm-hmm.
into defense mode. I was ready to fight. Like all the things happen in your body because we're literally being triggered 24/7 by things. And when you can get curious, like I said, step 2 is like getting, when was the first time I ever felt this? Step 3 is like, okay, what was real then and what is real now? And I wrote down the reality of it was we were in a very tiny home. My parents' family was from LA. They were driving 5 hours to get to us. It didn't make sense for them to stay in the living room when they can stay in my room, put the little 6-year old in my dad's bed. Like it was never that they didn't love me. And I didn't even know that's what I had curated in my head. I had no idea, but until I allowed myself to get curious, I was like, okay, what did I feel then? Like, what did that little girl feel? That's where I say step 3. Like, what did she feel then? What was real for her? And what is real for me now? And in the scenario, my husband's not disrespecting me. He wants to spend Christmas with his family. Could it have been different? Yes. So it's really, really getting curious about the narrative and how do we rewrite it? What's actually real for us? And then step 4 is like the ask. Like, how can you ask somebody else to share this experience with you? Or how do you ask them for what you really need? Because we all need things. So step 4 is the ask. How can you write? What's the next step that you need to do to heal this wound or to rewrite the belief? And for me, it was letting my husband know, hey, when I was 6 years old, this happened and it has nothing to do with you. I just lashed out because in that moment, I allowed him to come into my mind and my world and see what I was feeling. Ever since then, Kelsey, to this day, they asked my husband something. He's like, let me check with Cristal because I don't know if we have plans.
Yeah.
To this day, and I was telling him actually this last week, and I said, the amount of respect that I feel that you have for me, that you check in with me, that you do this. He's like, well, because it's important to you. And I didn't even know it was important to you. I didn't
Yeah.
know this mattered. But that whole situation, going through the 4 steps that I always talk about now, has allowed me to change the conversation and invite them in because people can't read our minds. We assume, oh, they know. Oh, we assume that they know I wasn't trying to hurt them, but no one can read your mind. And I like to always say, like, common sense isn't common because your common sense is very different than somebody else's common sense.
Yeah. And you took that self ownership, sitting in the car, pulling out your notes app on your
Mm-hmm.
phone to say, like, okay, what am I feeling? And these are the steps that I'm going to create for myself. And now you have a practice that you get to go back to, but you had to go first. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it is really easy when we feel like we're in the right and other people are in the wrong to be like, nope, I'm not going to talk to him until
Yeah.
he apologizes. Nope, I'm not going to do that. Where no one wins, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes, especially if we're talking about our partner, someone we love, someone we share our life with, to be able to say, like, you could take that route, but are you really going to get the result that you want? Is it really going to get you what you want? Where you didn't just say, okay, I'm sorry, I was wrong, you can do whatever you want. What you did was identify how to communicate what you need
Mm-hmm.
next time. And so it wasn't just like, oh, that person's 100% right. You talked
Yeah.
about, hey, this is what I need next time, but you had to go first to figure out how to even
Yeah.
communicate that and how to even put yourself in a place that you could both win. because that's the goal at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's communicating with our kids and them not understanding us, or our partner or anyone else, at the end of the day, we don't want the people we love to not feel good. And we want to feel good too. We want to both have that respect of how we feel and what's next. And I think it's so important that you took that self ownership, because it is very easy to be like, well, it's not my job. They messed up.
Yeah, and it's something you can do. Like if you just go on Google and put like emotion wheel, like it literally gives you the wheels of all these emotions. You can literally sit there and be like, okay, what am I feeling right now? Okay, I feel this, I feel, and it there's like you can drop down and identify the emotion that is your actual, because that's the emotion that your body's having a response to. And how do you nurture your nervous system and say, okay, what was real for you then and what's real for you now? And that's how you change the whole narrative, but that's how you break the cycle. A lot of people talk about breaking the cycle and breaking the cycle. Okay, you're not going to break the cycle by doing affirmations. You're going to break the cycle by shoving it under the rug and pretending like it didn't happen, because that's how I grew up. My dad would do these things to my mom, or my mom would do these things, or my dad. We grew up being like hit by our dad, like, and it wasn't just a spank. It was like we used to get beat up by our dad because that's the way we were gonna learn. And now, no, looking back, I was like, well, my dad used to get so like brutally beat up by the people that he worked for, so that's how he learned to discipline. And there's so much anger. For so long I had so much anger towards my dad, so much that I never thought I was going to talk to him. I never thought I was going to forgive him. Me and my dad are so close now, and there's so much healing that had to happen. But I did have to go first. I did have to get curious. What was I feeling? I did have to do the work. And now going back to it, like I've learned from my dad, and we literally adapt the beliefs as a child. Like we're not born. If you think about like most women in bathing suits, they think like, oh, I'm so shy, or I don't want to show my body. There's a belief that you carry around bathing suits. For me, it's the feeling
Yeah.
of I can't wear a bathing suit because the moment I wear a bathing suit, I'm being provocative towards men. But that's just the way I was raised by my mom. Oh, if I wore shorts, I was always getting in trouble because I'm calling out men. We all have beliefs. So every single belief in our body was given to us by somebody that we love to protect us, or to make us quote unquote like the street smart. Like, oh, I'm going to give her this so that she can learn to defend herself out in the real world. But
Mm-hmm.
we all have these inventory of beliefs that we get to say, okay, what's real for me and what's not. And when you get
Yeah.
to go through that 4-step process, you get to literally break the cycle and create the new belief. Because even with the bathing suit, I don't have a daughter. I only have a son. But I don't ever want a little girl to feel like you can't wear a bathing suit because you're provoking men. But that's how I was raised. And to this day, I like to
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, I'm over it, but I'm not. Even to this
Yeah.
day, when I wear makeup, I still get very insecure. I still get, oh, am I being too revealing? Because it's something that I grew up with, that was given to me, and I have to actively work on rewriting the narrative. But all of us, like, we have the ability to sit there and say, ooh, is this mine or is this somebody else's? And if it's somebody else's, how do I just dive deeper a little bit and rewrite? Okay, what was true then? What is true now? And what do I actually need to make myself feel better?
Yeah. You know, it's so funny that you say that, because my husband just took a couple pictures of me for, maternity pictures
Mhm.
before I have this baby. And one of which, my stomach's out. I'm wearing like a bra and underwear and like a jacket. Like I'm pretty close to naked. And
Uh-huh.
it's like a bathing suit with a sweater on top.
Hmm.
And I was like, hey, I'm thinking about posting this, but like I want your permission as your wife. Like, do you have any issue with me posting this on social media? He's like, no, I think if you want to post it, you should post it. And I was like, I don't know if I want to post it. And that's kind of exactly what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm identifying, like, is this something I want to post? And am
Yeah.
I good with it? Good or bad, right? Like I don't
Yeah.
need to post it for reasons of like, oh, other people share these pictures, and vice versa. Do I feel comfortable sharing it from my beliefs, not from what I
Yeah.
think other people are going to say or do or think? And so it's interesting how that shows up in so many different areas.
Yeah.
And I can't think of anything that was said to me as a child that would give me belief one way or the other around that. But sometimes we don't have a specific pinpoint
Mhm.
of like, oh, my mom said this or my dad said this, but it's just like ingrained in from societal culture,
Mhm.
or it's something that is completely subconscious. But if we don't take the moment to take a step back and think, is this mine or is this someone else's? then we don't know. We don't know what we believe. We don't
Yeah.
know. We go through life just doing this. So I'm curious, your son's only 4 months old.
Hmm.
And so you haven't had necessarily the experiences of like really navigating deep conversations yet.
Hmm.
But I believe that all moms have these thoughts, right? Of what type of mom that they want to be. Have
Hmm.
you thought about like certain things that you're like, these are the values, these are the morals that we're going to instill? And these are the things that are like up for freedom and up for discussion. And you can share specifics if you want, or more just like the process that you take yourself through to decide like, is this going to be something that I'm going to be like, this is what we believe in this family, or this is something like, hey, I can't wait to see what you believe, type of thing.
Yeah. So it's funny because I was just having a conversation with a friend about this, but the other day we had a scenario where he was crying. He was just crying and I was getting frustrated. And he was crying and I was like, you know what? He ate, he has a clean diaper, he's good. I'm just gonna let him cry it out a little bit because I don't know what to do. And my husband comes in and he's like, he's crying and he was gonna take him. And I got very defensive and I was like, no, leave him. And I realized in that moment I felt judged. I felt like he was judging me because I couldn't make him stop crying.
Yeah.
And I wanted him to leave them there to him let him quote unquote cry it out. And then my husband took him and I got a little irritated. And I sat here in my office, Kelsey, and I was like, why did this bother me so much? And I realized like I was raised like, figure it out. You're tough. You're tough. Like you'll get through it. You'll get through it. And he's only 4 months. But in that moment, like that's what I was trying to do. Make him be tough, like
Yeah.
make him figure it out. He's 4 months. And it was something so small that my husband did it. And then I sat here and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I felt like a horrible human. But then I realized like this is what's engraved in me and how I was raised. So in that moment, I realized like I really want to work on being like a safe person for my son and being the person that he knows whether he did good or he did wrong or he's afraid. I like he can come to me with zero judgment. And I think that's something that I'm going to figure out how to navigate because I don't fully have the answer of like how I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
But I know that constantly I want to ask myself, like, am I making him feel safe?
Yeah.
Am I making him feel safe? Because I met some incredible humans probably a few months ago, and they have 7 kids. The oldest is 21. And they were telling me how he went to college and then he realized, oh, I'm too far away from my family. I want to move closer to college to be close to my family. And I was telling him, wow, at 21, all I wanted was to like go away. I didn't want to be
Yeah.
near my family. So for have a 21-year-old to come back and be like, no, I want to move closer because I miss my mom. I miss my dad. I said, wow, you guys must make that boy feel so safe that he wants to come back. So sure enough, he changed colleges. He's like a few like hour probably I think she said like an hour away from her house now just to be near the family. And as I was processing that scenario that happened a few days ago with my son, I thought that's all I want. I just want my son to know that one, I'm his safe space and regardless of what happens, I'm going to do my best, but there's no judgment ever on my end. And then two, the other thing that I want him to I don't know if it's believe, but I really want to show him that he's being guided in life
Yeah.
and that he's never really alone, whether it's through God, whether it's through his ancestors or his lineage or whoever he believes. I want him to like really have that faith and develop that trust in life and journey. That even if it goes
Mm.
horribly and he doesn't get that thing that he wants, that it's literally the thing that needed to happen for the next thing to happen to him. I think those are my biggest things that as I've been navigating this question, is just I want him to know that he's safe at home with his people and that it's always working out for him, good or
Yeah.
bad, that it's always
Yeah.
working out exactly as it needs to. Because I think the all the times that I felt lost in life, it's because I had an expectation of like, I think it should go this way and it didn't. And I felt like a failure or I wasn't smart enough or I felt my family because I didn't do that thing. But really just I think help him understand that it's happening exactly as it needs to happen and he can't mess it up.
Yeah. I think that's so important in this. The words you said were that he's not alone, right? That there's always someone guiding him. He's guided. and that can be whatever you believe. But that's a really common theme that we hear with, adolescents, teens, tweens, especially, is I feel so alone. And I
Mm-hmm.
think until you get into this space of your own internal work or connecting on a deeper level with people, you do often feel alone. And sometimes even still then, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's when you can kind of no longer be alone with yourself that you're not going to feel that way. But I think as parents, you're right. That's one of the biggest things that I hope to instill too is, you feeling lonely is lonely, and it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the hardest things that I think that individuals feel. And when you feel that way, you don't know who to go to get a solution,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you feel alone. So really navigating like you are guided and you're not alone, I think that's a big takeaway. So I admire you for that, and I definitely agree. I absolutely love that. Now, before we top into our last couple questions, where can everyone find you? Where can they tap into your world and be a part of all the amazingness that you share with all the women?
Thank you. So I'm mainly on Instagram. Like you can find me dancing on Instagram, all the things on Instagram. I'm on Instagram at Cristal Jacobo, which is just my first name and last name. And then I also have a podcast. I have a podcast called She's Made for More, where we have interviews with different women. We share how they're embodying their more and really diving into the difference that more can be. Not really putting a light on more is just more money or more wealth or more status. More can literally be just being the best freaking mom that you want to be. That is your more. So
Yeah.
we do that on the podcast as well.
So good. And that's what I'm so aligned with in your community. I mean, we talk about that with Mama Has Goals is your goals are yours, right? Your goal
Mm-hmm.
may be to get dressed today. Your goal
Mm-hmm.
may be to launch a big business. It may be to make a super cute Pinterest snack. Whatever it is, I don't care what your goals are. And it's really the same with your community is I don't care what your more is, but you
Mm-hmm.
are made for more. And your community is so strong in pulling that together and coming back to that idea of loneliness. Like you help everyone understand you're not alone and you can bring people together in person and virtual. You do such a good job
Yeah.
with that. So thank you for that. Okay, couple last questions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you do energetics and somatics. I'd love for you to give us like a quick breakdown of what that means for someone that's like, okay, what is that tool and how could I use it? And how you implement this on a daily level. What does it look like on a daily level to be? We talked about gratitude, but is there
Mm-hmm.
another step? Is there anything else that you bring in on a daily level?
Yeah. So doing something you love every single day. And it sounds like super big. Like I don't have time or I don't do, okay. I want you to think about the smallest thing that you love to do and how can you do more of that every day? Because your brain and your cells in your body store memories and they store trauma. So whether it was this little boy stole my lunch when I was 8 years old, then you develop the mechanism of my things are not safe. And now you started keeping your things away from people because they're not safe, which then can go into, I don't want to tell people the goals that I have because what if somebody beats me and does them and like takes them away from me. So
Yeah.
again, we're just humans responding every single day, but we're humans responding every day based on the beliefs that we have. And these beliefs, they're stored in our actual body. Gratitude is huge because when you're doing gratitude, you're actually helping your body rewire, like not to go in all the scientific stuff because I don't want to lose you guys, but you're helping your body actually rewire and rewrite new pathways. So when you think about the brain waves, every time you're expressing gratitude or you're doing the things that make you happy, think of like a little bridge being built in your brain and it's adding more and more and more and more things. And this is
Yeah.
like we can go really deep into the science of like all of it. But the same thing is with happiness and like the happy chemicals. If people always talk about the happy chemicals, they're real. They're real. And when you can do small things, so I'm gonna like challenge everybody on here. Do one thing a day that makes you happy. Something as simple for me, it's singing. I grew up,
Mm-hmm.
I'm horrible at singing, but I grew up dancing and my mom had music when we would cook and we would clean. And every morning I wake up and I don't do it at a specific time, but when I'm ready, when I'm making lunch, I'll put on music. I have a speaker in my kitchen to make it more convenient for me. And I'll literally just put on, sometimes it's R&B, sometimes it's 2000s music, sometimes it's Hannah Montana playlist, whatever it is, but I put on a song that's gonna make me feel good. And I'm
Yeah.
making whatever food I'm making, I'm dancing in the kitchen, I do it with my son, And it seems like a silly 3 minutes, but those 3 minutes will completely change the way how I feel about the day. Some people it's singing or dancing in your car. Some people it's like taking the chocolate to work and having that chocolate because that chocolate makes you feel so happy. Like
Yeah.
identifying what is the thing that you can do every day that's going to remind you of your happiness, your childhood, when this thing happened. I also have a photo of me and my husband at an event that we did. It was the very last event that I did right before I gave birth, where it was just me and him. And I have this picture right in my chair with my baby, because sometimes when I'm frustrated or I can't help, I look at that picture and immediately brings me this peace and calm. And how do we purposely set up these things around our life to bring us back to what is real and not let us stay stuck in the emotions and everything, because your body remembers. There's a
Mm-hmm.
book that's called Your Body Keeps the Score. Your body keeps the score, which is why if someone does something to you, the next time you see that person, you immediately feel like your body tense because your body remembers. We like to say words don't hurt me or bricks and stones may hurt my bones, but words hurt worse than getting hit with a brick and a stone,
Yeah.
because they're engraved in your body and they will stay in your body unless you're actually diving into them. So the process that I gave you guys earlier, do that as often as you can.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge in helping you become who you're wanting to become, not necessarily who you think you are, but becoming who you want to become.
So good. And what is something that you're really excited about right now? A goal that you have? You know, you're 4 months postpartum. I feel like, constantly doing things. Like, you have your events, you have your programs, but I also know you really value having a flexible work schedule and creating a business that has flexibility. And so, right now in this season, what's something that you consider a goal or you're excited about that's really like lighting you up as you look forward? And it could be personal or professional.
There's one I'm really, really excited about taking spontaneous trips with my boys,
Yeah.
because in this life, like he's really little. We got to pack the breast pump. We got to pack this. We got to pack the swing. We got to pack so many things.
Yeah.
But something that seems so small is like taking spontaneous trips. I didn't realize how much I loved them until I wasn't able to do them. And I think my first 2 months, I had a rough time with postpartum because I felt like I couldn't go anywhere without planning. And I
Mm.
love a good plan. But I realized as a little girl, and again, going back to behaviors and triggers, as a little girl, I never went anywhere. We didn't have the funds. My dad was always working. Every Sunday we went to church and we went to go get groceries and we came back home. You wore your best clothes to go get groceries. And in the season of life that I'm, because of my work, because of the flexibility that I've created, I can go have lunch with my husband at a restaurant any day of the week. And when I couldn't because I just had a baby,
Hmm.
I realized this makes me feel so trapped. And I didn't even know this was a thing. And I'm really, really excited about baby maybe turning like a year and saying like, okay, grab your stuff. Let's go get in the truck. Let's go. And let's just leave and take spontaneous trips. That's what I'm really excited about.
Yeah, that'll be fun. You guys can experience that together. And you have a bunch of trips coming up, you said, even
Hmm.
right now. So that's really exciting. Well, Crystal, this conversation was so good. Thank you so much for being here and sharing, so much openly and vulnerably with us about your family, the things you've navigated, and how you continue to move through it all. You're such an inspiration, not as just another woman, but as a mom now too, and seeing how you do it all. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Super grateful that super grateful that I was able to share just whatever came through. And I hope it resonates with your audience.
Thank you.